It's April Fool's Day, 1999. A grandmother arrives at her daughter's house in Alliance, Ohio, ready to take her 6-year-old grandson to afternoon kindergarten. Instead of finding a typical morning routine, she discovers a scene that will haunt her forever. Her 26-year-old daughter, Yvonne Lane, lies face down in a pool of blood, her throat slashed so deeply that the knife left a mark on her spinal cord. But here's where this story takes a turn that will make you question everything you think you know about justice. The man convicted of orchestrating this brutal murder might be completely innocent, and the real killer? They could still be walking free 25 years later. I'm about to take you deep into a case that exposes the terrifying fragility of our justice system. A case where coerced confessions, botched investigations, and potential police corruption converge to create what might be one of Ohio's most devastating wrongful convictions. This is the story of David Thorne, Yvonne Lane, and a murder that reveals how easily the line between guilt and innocence can be erased. But before we dive into this labyrinth of evidence and lies, I need you to understand something crucial. In our justice system, there's a fundamental difference between guilty and not guilty. Not guilty doesn't mean innocent. It simply means the prosecution failed to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It means the jury wasn't convinced. But what happens when that distinction becomes the difference between freedom and a life sentence? What happens when the very people sworn to protect us might be the ones we need protection from? By the end of this investigation, you'll be asking yourself the same question that's haunted legal experts for decades. How can we truly know if someone is wrongfully convicted when the system designed to find the truth becomes the very thing that obscures it? To understand this case, we need to understand Yvonne Lane, not just as a victim, but as a complex woman whose life intersected with dangerous people in ways that would ultimately seal her fate. Yvonne was 26 years old, a mother of 5 children, each with different fathers. She lived in Alliance, Ohio, a small city where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. According to court documents and witness statements, Yvonne worked as a stripper and was involved in sex work, details that would later become crucial to understanding who might have wanted her dead. But here's what makes Yvonne's story particularly tragic. She wasn't just struggling to survive, she was actively trying to build a better life for her children. She had recently filed for child support for her 4th child, Brandon, whose father was David Thorne. This wasn't an act of vindictiveness. It was a mother trying to secure financial stability for her son. The relationship between Yvonne and David was brief but significant. They dated in late 1995 and early 1996, during which time Yvonne became pregnant with Brandon. David didn't even know about the pregnancy or the child until April 1998, when he was contacted by the Child Support Enforcement Agency. Far from being angry or resentful, David appeared for paternity testing, met his son, and reconnected with Yvonne. According to case records, they worked out a mutually agreeable visitation schedule, and David began paying support even before the DNA results were finalized. This paints a picture very different from what prosecutors would later claim, that David was so angry about paying child support that he hired someone to kill Yvonne. The evidence suggests the opposite. David was embracing his role as a father and maintaining a cordial relationship with Yvonne. But Yvonne's life was complicated in ways that the initial investigation would largely ignore. She had connections to multiple men, including several police officers. According to witness statements that were never presented at trial, Yvonne had recently had negative encounters with law enforcement. One particularly disturbing incident involved a police officer who allegedly tried to force himself on her during a traffic stop for expired plates. This detail is crucial because it introduces alternative suspects that the Alliance Police Department's determined to ignore. Instead of investigating these leads, they focused laser-like attention on David Thorne from the moment they left the crime scene. The murder of Yvonne Lane occurred sometime between the evening of March 31st and the morning of April 1st, 1999. When Tanya Lane arrived to pick up her grandson Preston for kindergarten, she made the horrific discovery that would change multiple lives forever. But what happened next at that crime scene would become, in the words of forensic experts, a textbook example of what not to do at a crime scene. The Alliance Police Department's response was nothing short of catastrophic from an investigative standpoint. Chief Larry Dordia arrived at the scene with a woman, who he claimed was a ride-along, though others suggested she was his date. Regardless of her official status, she was allowed into an active crime scene, potentially contaminating evidence. No one wore shoe coverings or gloves to protect evidence. Officers simply stepped over Yvonne's body when they needed to cross the room. To remove the children from the house, they brought a blanket from Yvonne's third-floor bedroom, covered her body, handed the children over her corpse to other officers, then returned the blanket to her bed. Think about that for a moment. They used a blanket from the victim's own bedroom to cover her body, then put it back, potentially destroying or contaminating crucial evidence. The second-floor crime scene was covered in blood. The forensic evidence would later show that Yvonne's throat was cut while she stood facing the sliding glass balcony doors. She was then moved to the living room, where she collapsed face down on the floor. The murder weapon was wiped off on a pillow on the couch, and a bloody transfer from the killer was left on the sheet covering the couch. Someone had stepped on Yvonne's back, leaving a bloody footwear impression. There were several bloody footwear impressions throughout the room, which investigators recovered by cutting the wooden floor around the prints with a circular saw. But here's what's shocking. The stairs leading to the crime scene were never processed. No usable fingerprints were recovered. No DNA was collected. The coroner's examination was equally problematic. The time of death was established as sometime after 7, hardly precise. The coroner couldn't remember if he'd done a sexual assault kit and didn't know if the victim was cut right to left or left to right. No body temperature was recorded. A bruise on the thigh and a blow to the head were mentioned, but never explained. This wasn't just sloppy police work. It was investigative malpractice that would have consequences for years to come. From the moment police left the crime scene, they had one suspect in mind, David Thorne. Detectives went directly from Yvonne's house to David's grandparents' home that night, telling his family he was their number one suspect. But who was David Thorne? He was a 26-year-old man who had worked at an auto dealership for 6 years with no history of violence. He was known as a hard worker and was involved in mixed martial arts, specifically shoot fighting. His background was marked by tragedy. His father had committed suicide when David was a child, and his mother was a long-distance truck driver whom he rarely saw. He was raised by his grandparents, who provided the stability his early life had lacked. When detectives arrived at his grandparents' house that night, David wasn't home. He went to the police station the following morning, but before he arrived, his grandfather had contacted an attorney who stopped the interview until David could seek representation. This decision would later be portrayed by prosecutors as evidence of guilt, but it was actually smart legal advice that any innocent person should follow. Here's the problem the police faced. David had a solid alibi. As previously mentioned, he trained in martial arts and was present at a class for the majority of the evening, considering the length of the class and how far away it was from his house. He could account for his whereabouts during the time frame when Yvonne was murdered. This should have eliminated him as a suspect, but instead, it led investigators to develop a theory that would ultimately destroy 2 lives. Because David had an alibi and they were determined to make this crime his, they needed a co-conspirator. The theory that developed was a murder for hire. They began pressuring David's friends and acquaintances to falsely confess to being hired by David to commit the murder. According to case documents, they pressured 3 different people before they found someone emotionally susceptible to their intimidation tactics. That person was Joseph Wilkes, an 18-year-old high school dropout with an IQ lower than normal. In grade school, Joe had been evaluated as having a severe behavioral handicap and was labeled emotionally disturbed. He was exactly the kind of vulnerable individual who could be manipulated into confessing to a crime he didn't commit. In July 1999, police arrested Joseph Wilkes and convinced him that David Thorne was in the next room, implicating him in Yvonne's murder. This was a lie. David wasn't there and hadn't spoken to police since his initial aborted interview.
David, what I did. Has anyone in this room threatened you? No, sir. Has anyone in this room promised you anything? No, sir. Okay. Okay, we're investigating the homicide of Yvonne Lane. Can you tell us your part in this? David, I've known David Thorne for about 4 years now. He's been training me in shoot fighting, and he's always been talking to me like how much he wishes that woman was out of his life and that he could have his little boy. And then for years I told him to keep me out of it. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then what woman was that, Joe? Yvonne Lane. Okay. And then one day I just lost everything and I didn't care about life no more, and David knew about it and took advantage of me. And were you having some hard times with that? I lost my family, I lost all my friends, I lost my little brother and sister, I lost everything. I had nothing anymore. And David knew that? Yes, he knew it because I always talked to him about my problems. So what did David say to you? David was like, well, he goes, do you want your life to be better? Because I can make it that way. He goes, I'll pay you to do something for me, and I'll make sure that you're gone and out of the state and everything and have a better life to live. And Joe, I asked him what it was, and he said to kill somebody. And at that point, I really didn't care about life or nothing but David. And he asked me if I would do it, and I told him yes. When did he approach you to do this, Joe? Like, I want to say about a month before it happened. And he told me that he'd make sure I was okay, and that I'd stay out of it. And so he picked me up one morning, took me to Alliance Mall at the Comfort Inn, and had me pay for a room with a $100 bill, and then sent me to get a knife and some baseball gloves. And we rode around all day, and he told me how to do it. He told me, he's like, just leave the store at the mall about 9:30, just make sure it's done by 10 o'clock, because then he'll be covered, he'll be leaving, he'll have Josh with him and Cat. Okay, go ahead. And he'll be leaving shoot fighting class and be stopping at a BP or something to get something to drink or eat, and he would be covered on the camera, and then it would be done before he got back. So I said okay, and he dropped me off that night, and I left around 9:30. And how did you get to the house from the mall? I walked from the mall to the house, and I'd taken the gloves and my knife, and I was in some Nike gear, and I was walking down, and I walked to her house, and the door was unlocked. I opened it, I screamed her name, and I was walking up the first flight of stairs, and she was coming down her bedroom. Does she know you? And she's met me once. Okay. What did she say to you? And she was like, hey, what are you doing here? She goes, I haven't seen you in a long time. I was like, oh, David just wanted me to stop by and see how things were. And then we were sitting there talking for about 3 to 5 minutes, and then I did it. Okay. I know this is going to be hard, but we got to go through, and you tell me what happened here. Where were you sitting? Were you sitting upstairs or downstairs? We were on the second floor, not the third one. Okay. And we're sitting on the couch talking, and I reached over and grabbed her hand. Okay, did she get up and try to run? Yes, she tried to run out the door. Which door did she try to run out? The big glass door that slides. And then she... Take it easy. Then she asked me why, and I told her David wanted me to. Then she fell on the floor and walked over by her walked out and ran into the knife on one of the side street gutters. And I went back and I sat up all night in the motel.
What did you do with the clothes? Did you have blood on the clothes?
Yes. I threw them away somewhere after David picked me up. And
you remember where you threw them?
no.
How did you leave the house? The same way you come in through the basement, or did you go out the sliding glass door?
No, I went out the basement. I ran down the steps and went out the basement door, and
you walked back to the mall?
And I ran back to the wall. And I sat up all night thinking about what I did, and thinking about my family and everything, and how David took advantage of me.
How much money did David pay you?
Like $300-some. And he told me he was going to get me out of here to get my life better. And that was waiting.
So he gave you $300? He gave you more money after that?
He gave me $100 to get the room and everything. Then he gave me like $200 to get new shoes and clothes. And as far as I remember, that was it.
He gave it all to you at once?
At different times, but it pretty much within the same week or two.
Okay, so he gave you the $100 before, and then the rest of it later?
He gave me the $100 to get the room, and then after it was done, he gave me $200, and then like 3 weeks later, he gave me another $100 for me to get an outfit. So he gave me $300 and $100 to get the room and buy that stuff.
When you checked out of the motel? Okay. Can you go back? Think back. Who picked you up?
Yes.
Did you go back by the house? Where did he pick you up at the mall?
Yes. No, he wouldn't go by the house. He pulled left out of the mall and went down the back road to go into Atwater.
Where did he drop you off there?
He dropped me off and ran off at my friend Summer's house.
So somewhere along the road that you threw the clothes out?
No, it was after that. He told me he goes put them in a bag and just told him, and I did, and I gave them to him. And my pants were here in Ravenna because I wasn't thinking of it, and I was at my friend's house, and I threw them in the woods.
Okay, what about your shoes? What did you do with your shoes?
I don't remember, sir.
You still got them?
No, I don't.
That morning, when you checked out, before you checked out, did you try calling Dave's phone number from a payphone?
Yes, sir. Then I called him twice, I think, 2 or 3 times. And I think he might have, but I'm not sure, but he might have answered once. But no, because he was at work and he was picking me up from work.
Did you call his work? Place of work?
No, I didn't.
Okay, did you?
I'm not sure if he did. I don't remember.
Okay, just to rehash, where did he drop you off at again, Joe?
Drop me off at the mall.
Okay, no, after he picked you up at the mall that morning.
After he picked me up, he dropped me off at my best friend Summer's house and told me that he'd be back and he'd give me the rest of my money and that he would make sure everything was okay.
That was in Randolph?
Yes.
Who's Brett Enoch?
That's Summer's stepfather.
Do you remember where you threw the pants in the woods?
Down by, if you go down 80, I want to say 88, going towards Maplewood, and you hang a right on the first road, you get out there, and there's like a little white house on your left-hand side. They were laying right there in the woods. I just tossed them in.
Did they have blood on?
Yes, they did.
You'd be able to show us where they're at?
If they're still there, yes, sir.
That night, what was Yvonne wearing? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
Okay. What kind of things were you talking to her about when you got there?
She just asked me how things were going and how come I haven't been around, and I told her, well, me and David really hasn't been together, which we really haven't, and I just called him on the phone and talked to him and him about my problems and thought he was helping me, but he wasn't. And she asked me, she was like, so where's David? And I said, he's at the shoot party. And she was like, she goes, oh yeah, I forgot, it's, what was it, Wednesday or Thursday? And
so what did she say when you pulled the knife out?
she didn't see me. She had her head turned. She was looking over to the side, and I pulled it up and was holding it down by my leg. And we continued talking, then when she turned her head again, I did it.
She grabbed her by the hair?
Yeah.
Pull her hair pretty hard? She was standing next to the sliding glass door?
No, she was sitting on the couch to begin with, then she jumped up and went over to the sliding glass door.
After you cut it?
Yes.
Why did you throw the TV stand on top of it?
I tripped over it.
The gloves, where were the gloves at?
They were, I threw them in a dumpster at McDonald's up by her house. And I didn't see them.
When you left the house and you ran back to the motel, did you run down State Street?
Yes.
And do you remember running past elementary school? Is that
I'm not sure.
is that right by McDonald's?
It's right by McDonald's.
Is that right about where you got rid of the knife?
No, it was when I was coming out of her house. I ran up a side street and I ditched it in a side street and I ran down.
Do you think you'd be able to show us where you ditched it at?
It's on one of those side streets.
Okay. Joe, you've been to the house before, is that correct?
Once, well, now twice.
Okay. 916 Divine Street? What was the first time? Just explain how you were there the first time and who was with you.
Me and David Thorne went there the first time to pick up his son, Brandon, and
What did the little boy do? The little boy that was walking around.
I didn't see no little boy. I did not.
He keeps talking about man hurt mommy and big mess. Gotta get a towel and clean it up.
I never seen anybody. The only person I saw was her.
So why did David want this done?
So David could have his little boy and he wouldn't have to pay so much money.
For child support?
Yes.
He told you this?
Yes.
Did you ever talk to him about it when Amy was there?
No, he wouldn't talk around Amy. And as far as I knew, that's what he told me. He wouldn't talk around Amy.
Did you tell anybody else what you had done? No. Are you sorry for what you did, Joe?
Sorry, I'm sorry. I can't believe I did it. He took advantage of me.
Are you willing to stand up for yourself and testify in court against David Thorne? Okay. Anything else? Okay, that's going to conclude this interview. It's Wednesday, July 14th, 1999. The time now is 13:26 hours.
I just wanted to rehash what we talked about yesterday. And I know it's kind of difficult, okay? But you said after you cut Yvonne, did she talk? Did she say something to you?
Yes, she looked at me and she asked me why I did. And I told her David wanted me to.
And she got up to run towards the door. How far did she make it, Joe?
She made it to the door and then she stopped and she walked back and she came back over and looked at me and was like, why'd you do it? And I told her, and she fell.
I just wanted to... Okay, relax for a minute. Just relax. You're all right. Relax. That night, when David picked you up at Brent Enoch's, remember when he picked you up? He was driving a small red car?
Yes, a red Cavalier.
Okay. he picked you up, did Brent see you get in and go with him?
Yes.
Who else?
Brent, Karen, and some Enoch.
Okay. And you recall about what time that was or not?
No, I'm not sure.
Okay. And he dropped you off at the mall then, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then you said later on he picked you back up?
Later on in the next morning.
Oh, the next morning. Okay.
Because I remember him telling me that he had to go to work and he was going to come and give me on his break. And picked me up and dropped me off.
Okay, Joe, do you still offer this statement of your own free will?
Yes.
Have the detectives of the Alliance Police Department or anybody else promised you anything for your statement?
No.
Have we threatened you? Have we done anything to you to get this statement from you?
No.
We're going to end this statement. It's still Thursday, July 15th, 1999. Time now is 16:36 hours.
The interrogation tactics used on Joe Wilkes were textbook examples of coercion. Detectives showed him crime scene photos and threatened him with the death penalty. They offered him a deal: testify against David Thorne and save his own life. Joe later told his minister that they said they were going to light him up like the 4th of July in the electric chair, and he was too young to die. Joe's confession was riddled with inconsistencies and factual errors that should have immediately raised red flags. He couldn't remember basic details of the crime and got even the most fundamental facts wrong. He didn't even know which room the murder had occurred in. And maybe most damning to his confession was when he told the detectives that he killed Yvonne on the couch. This simply could not have been the case. I've looked at more than 250 crime scene photos, including the ones of Yvonne Lane's body. Her throat was cut so deeply it severed both arteries, her jugular vein, and her trachea. The amount of arterial spray from that vicious wound would almost be unimaginable. It was a near decapitation. Due to the crime scene photos, it's very clear the initial attack occurred at the sliding glass door, and her body had been dragged backwards, most likely as she was struggling for her last breath of life. There was some blood on the couch, but most of it was transfer blood. No serious forensic expert could look at that scene and say the attack commenced on the couch. The sliding glass door was covered in blood spray, and there is a significant amount of blood on the floor with heel drag marks indicating someone had dragged her backwards after the attack. What's more is that Yvonne was attacked from behind, meaning either someone had snuck up on her and attacked, or she knew her attacker intimately and was comfortable enough to turn her back on them. Yvonne hardly knew Joe Wilkes, yet according to Joe's confession, the two were sitting on the couch talking when he attacked her. Despite the contaminated crime scene, we can say with a high degree of certainty that the murder occurred in a much different manner. Therefore, Joe's confession is entirely unreliable. Prosecutors pressed forward anyway, convinced they had their case. According to Joe's confession, David had asked him to murder Yvonne because he didn't want to pay child support. This also falls apart when you find out that David had a lot of money in an investment account his grandfather had set up for him when he was young. Basically, David could have written a check for all 18 years of child support statements and still had plenty of money left over. This murder was almost certainly not financially motivated. David allegedly gave Joe $300 to commit the murder and told him to get a room at the Comfort Inn, go to Yvonne's house, and be done with the murder by 10 p.m. But here's where this part of the confession falls apart under scrutiny. David had given Joe $300 4 months before the murder to buy an old car, which David then fixed up so Joe would have transportation. Joe had a habit of rollerblading to David's house and asking for rides to work. The car was meant to solve both problems. Joe had even paid the $300 back to David. Joe testified that he bought the murder weapon, a pocket knife, at Kmart the night of the murder and saw his friend Rick Webb at the store. But defense witness Rick Webb testified that he did see Joe buying a pocket knife at Walmart 6 weeks after the murder. He had a receipt to verify the date. When confronted with this contradiction, the judge laughingly told the attorneys at sidebar within David's hearing that Joe must have bought that knife to murder someone else. To bolster Joe's testimony, prosecutors called 2 witnesses who claimed to have seen Joe at the Carnation Mall on the night of the murder: Rose Moore and Christopher Campbell. Rose testified that she and her boyfriend Chris were at the mall food court on March 31st after finishing work at 8:01 p.m. She claimed they ran into Joe, who seemed nervous, and told them he was in town to kill someone and that someone had paid him. She said Joe gave Chris a business card with his name and phone number.
I'm Detective William Mucklow. This is a reference to case number AL 9903469, a reported homicide that took place March 31st, 99 through April 1st, 99 at 916 Divine Street, the victim being Yvonne Lane. We're in the county of Stark at an undisclosed location, and we're interviewing Rose Moore. Also present is Detective Bud Sampson. Rose, for the record, would you please state your full name for me and spell your last name?
Rose Marie Moore. It's M-O-H-R.
Okay, and how old are you right now?
23.
Okay, we spoke on the phone the other day, and you gave me some information pertaining back in March that you were working at the Carnation Mall and that you had gained some information possibly about this homicide. Could you just go ahead and tell me what transpired several months ago along with your boyfriend, Chris Campbell?
Okay, I was working at IPC in the Carnation Mall, and Chris Campbell was there also. And we got off work early, and I had to call my dad to pick us up. We went in the cafe court waiting on my dad, and we got something to eat. I think it was some French fries or something. And as we were sitting down, Chris Campbell was looking at this table diagonal from us, and him and this guy kept staring at each other. And I asked Chris, I said, do you know who that guy is? You know, because they were staring at each other. And he said, well, he looks familiar. And they looked at each other again, and I guess they recognized each other when they looked again. And the guy named Joe came over to our table and sat down. And they started talking about going to school together in Ravenna and the old days, stuff they used to do together and hang out. And Chris Campbell asked him, he said, well, you know, what are you in town for? And he said, Joe said that he had a job to do, and that some guy was paying him to stay at the Comfort Inn for the weekend. And he said, you know, well, he really got off the subject, because Chris kept trying to get it out of him what he was there for. And I don't think he wanted to say. And Chris, you know, kept saying, well, I'm your friend, you know, you can trust me. And then he got off the subject and started talking about something else, Joe did. And then Chris brought it up again and asked him, you know, well, what kind of job are you here to do? And he said, well, some guy paid me to kill some girl in Alliance. And he didn't say no names, he just said, I'm here to kill some girl. And that he was getting paid for it, so much money up front, and then when the job was done, he was getting more money. And the guy that paid him to do it was paying for him to stay at the hotel too. And he showed us a knife that he had on him. I think it was in his pocket. And it looked like a hunting knife to me. It wasn't no pocket knife, it was bigger than that. And he showed us, and he said that that's what he was supposed to kill her with. And really, after that, he got off the subject, because he was like really fidgety. I think he was really nervous or something. And he wrote down his name and number, and he handed it to Chris. And Chris stuck it in his wallet. And then my dad showed up outside, so that's when, you know, we parted with him, and we went out to my dad. And I forget where we went after that, but when my dad picked us up, and we was going up the road, we saw him walking. I don't know where he was walking to. He was walking up State Street, upward. From the mall, he was walking into town. Okay. Yeah, he was walking upward. I don't know where he was headed. My dad just beeped at him because Chris said, there's my friend, you know, beep at him. And then that was it. We didn't hear from him after that because I got into Chris's Chris Campbell's wallet and took the number out, and I hid it behind my dad's dresser because I didn't want him associating with the murderer. By the way, he was talking, he killed more than one person before. Like, it wasn't no big deal to him. So I was really scared. You know, I was scared for my life. I have 2 children. So.
Prior to this tape starting, I showed you a picture here of a white male subject. Is that correct?
Yes.
And who'd you identify this person in the picture as?
That's Joe Wilkes.
That's the person that was talking to Chris and yourself at the Carnation Mall back in March.
Right.
Okay. And you also said that you didn't remember approximately what date it was, right?
Right. I didn't remember. I just know the night we talked to him, it was the night he just got in the hotel. Because that's what he said.
What time did you go off work that day?
It was in the evening.
After 6?
Yeah. I would say somewhere around there. Yeah, because I think we went in like around 4. I'm not really positive. IPC might have a record of that.
It was later in the afternoon.
Yeah, it was in the evening. I mean, it was dark outside when my dad picked us up, so.
Christopher Campbell's testimony at trial differed slightly from his police statement in that he admits that Joe never actually admitted that he was there to kill anybody, but rather just showed Chris a pocket knife that he said he'd just bought.
Today's date is July 12, 1999. The time is 11:28 a.m. I'm Detective John R. Leach. In the room with me is Officer Troy Hershey and Christopher Campbell. We'll be discussing AL 9903469, an aggravated murder that occurred in Alliance, Stark County, state of Ohio, on April 1st, 1999 at 916 Divine Street, victim being Yvonne Lane. Chris, for the tape, could you please state your full name?
Christopher Lee Campbell.
Conversation you had with an individual by the name of Joseph Wilkes on March 31st of 1999?
Yes.
Okay, and where were you at when that conversation took place?
At the mall?
Carnation Mall?
Yeah.
That would be 2500 West State Street. Who were you with when you had this conversation with Joe?
I was with my girlfriend, Rosemore.
And how did you happen to run into Joe?
As we was walking to a food court, I saw Joe sitting at the other table and came over and we sat at a round table and we just started talking.
You and he have some history. What is that?
Well, we went to school together, like year 97, 98. We took some masonry classes together at Ravenna High School, Maplewood, JBS.
So you know him pretty good?
Mm-hmm.
And what did he say to you? I mean, was it a shock to see him in town? Or?
Yeah, it was a shock to see him in town because he lives clear out in Atwater and he just shows up in Alliance.
Yeah. What do you have to say?
Well, I just asked him, how he was doing and stuff like that, and where was he working at, and he says he does little odd jobs here and there.
And did you ask him what he was doing now, or?
Yeah, he said, that night he had some business to take care of for his girlfriend. So his girlfriend got him a room at Comfort Inn.
And did you inquire as to what kind of business that was?
Yeah, he basically he said that he had to kill someone for his girlfriend because his girlfriend didn't like this girl, so.
He said it in so many words?
Yeah.
Plain English, he was going to kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And did he tell you how he was going to do it?
No, he just showed me his knife that he had. that he had got from Kmart.
Okay. And what did he say about the knife? How did that come to play? He just says, I'm going to do a job, I'm going to kill somebody, and then he pulls out a knife?
Yeah,
or?
he just pulled out a knife and said, see you up.
Okay. And what kind of knife was it?
It looked like a... It was like a little sports knife that you use for fishing.
A folding knife?
Yeah.
Okay.
Folding knife.
Okay, did it have a serrated edge, do you remember?
Like with the teeth on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Do you think if you went back out to Kmart, you might be able to recognize that knife if you saw it?
Yeah.
Okay. Did he say anything about money? If he was getting paid for this job? Did you ask him that?
No, he said he was getting paid $300 up front.
Did he say how much he was getting after that?
No.
He didn't tell you where this girl was at? Or did he say it was in Alliance? Or?
Well, he said it was an alliance. That's why he was there. But he didn't exactly say where she lived or anything.
Yeah, he didn't say anything about the girl or no descriptions or anything?
No.
Or why his girlfriend didn't like her?
No, I never asked him that question. I was just going into real big details.
But his comment about the knife was just, look, see.
Yeah. He never...
He didn't make the comment like, this will do the job, or this ought to do the job. Did he say something like that?
Or this is what I'm going to use? Yeah, he did say that.
Did he? How did he say it?
He said, well, I got this little knife right here, and this is, what I'm going to use. He unfolded it, and we looked at it.
What makes these witnesses even more problematic is their backgrounds. The male witness was a career criminal who was arrested 2 days after David and Joe and held in jail until he testified for the prosecution at David's trial. This raises serious questions about whether his testimony was given in exchange for favorable treatment in his own case. David's family mortgaged their home and paid $100,000 for what they believed was the best criminal defense attorney in the county, Jeffrey Haupt. What they got was a lawyer who would prove to be utterly inadequate to the task of defending an innocent man's life. Jeffrey Haupt hired no experts and called only one witness. He smelled of alcohol throughout the trial, and he would lose his driver's license in February 2000, the month after David's sentencing, for DUI. This paints a picture of an attorney struggling with substance abuse during one of the most critical periods of his client's life. The prosecution's case rested almost entirely on Joe Wilkes' testimony, despite its numerous problems. Joe was called the state's star witness, but his performance on the stand was devastating to the prosecution's case, or should have been. He answered, "I don't know, I don't remember," or "I don't recall," 138 times while testifying. Most damning of all, Joe stated on the stand that the detectives told me what to say and how I did it, and was showing me pictures. They came to me. They were the ones that stated to me. This was a clear admission that his confession had been fed to him by police, yet the jury still convicted David. The trial took place in January 2000, and on January 25th, David Thorne was convicted of complicity to aggravated murder. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, a sentence typically reserved for the most heinous crimes committed by the most dangerous offenders. Joe Wilkes, who had allegedly committed the actual murder, received a more lenient sentence, life with the possibility of parole after 30 years, thanks to his plea deal and cooperation with prosecutors. After David's conviction, forensic expert Brent Turvey, who had also worked on the West Memphis 3 case, reviewed the evidence in 2003. His conclusions were devastating to the prosecution's case and should have immediately resulted in a new trial. Turvey concluded that the murder could not possibly have occurred the way Joe Wilkes described it. According to Joe's confession, he and Yvonne sat on the couch conversing when he suddenly grabbed her by the hair and cut her throat. She then allegedly jumped up, ran toward the sliding glass doors, stopped, turned around, and asked why before collapsing. Turvey's analysis of the blood spatter evidence proved this scenario was physically impossible. The attack began at the sliding glass door, not on the couch. Had it begun on the couch as Joe described, there would have been arterial spurting along the back of the couch and the wall above it. No such evidence existed. Furthermore, if Yvonne had tried to escape through the sliding glass door, there would have been bloody handprints on its surface or handle. No such evidence was found. Most importantly, if Yvonne had suffered the throat wound described and then tried to run, she would have been lightheaded from extreme blood loss, losing her vision and balance. She also would have found it nearly impossible to speak through her severed trachea. The blood evidence showed that Yvonne moved in a curved path from the sliding glass window to the living room, with no spiraled arterial spurt patterns that would indicate she had turned to face her attacker. This forensic evidence completely contradicted Joe's confession. Yet no judge has ever granted David a new trial based on this critical information. In July 2001, just over a year after David's conviction, Joseph Wilkes signed an affidavit recanting his confession. He testified at David's 2003 post-conviction hearing that nothing he said at David's trial was true. In his recantation, Joe stated that detectives told him, "All that was needed to convict me of this crime was a statement made against me, and that I would be put to death, that if I would testify against David Thorne, that I would be spared the death penalty. I was willing to make this deal to save my own life." This recantation should have been a bombshell that immediately freed David Thorne. Instead, it was rejected by the same judge who had presided over the original trial. All appeals, local, state, and federal, have been rejected, leaving David to serve a life sentence for a crime he didn't commit. Joe Wilkes remains incarcerated at the Marion Correctional Institution in Marion County, Ohio, and will be eligible for parole in 2029. He has maintained his recantation for over 2 decades, consistently stating that he lied at David's trial to save his own life. While police focused exclusively on David Thorne, they ignored numerous alternative suspects who had much stronger motives and opportunities to kill Yvonne Lane. This tunnel vision would prove to be one of the most damaging aspects of the investigation. According to case documents, many suspect names were given to police, including one of their fellow police officers who was harassing Yvonne. These leads were not investigated. The only person they were interested in was David Thorne, despite his solid alibi and lack of motive. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence that never made it to trial involved an eyewitness report from George Hale, a neighbor of Yvonne's. On the afternoon of April 1st, when Hale noticed the crime scene tape, he approached police to inform them that he had seen a man exiting Yvonne's residence with a trash bag at approximately 9:30 to 10 that morning. Hale provided a description of the man and was later shown a photo lineup that included an Alliance police officer. Remarkably, Hale identified the officer. When police told him that was impossible, they showed him another photo lineup the next day, this time including David Thorne's photo. Hale did not identify David. He was never shown a photo of Joe Wilkes. None of this information was provided to the defense, and Hale never testified at the trial. This represents a clear violation of Brady v. Maryland, which requires prosecutors to turn over all exculpatory evidence to the defense. The fact that Yvonne had recent negative encounters with police, including an incident where an officer allegedly tried to force himself on her during a traffic stop, should have made these alternative suspects a priority for investigation. Instead, they were ignored in favor of pursuing David Thorne. The inadequacy of David's defense became even more tragic in light of what happened to his attorney, Jeffrey Haupt. In January 2009, Haupt died from acute alcohol intoxication and hypothermia with a blood alcohol level of 0.27. He had walked home from a bar and was too disoriented to locate his door. He was found dead in his backyard. This tragic end illuminates the state Haupt was likely in during David's trial. A blood alcohol level of 0.27 is more than 3 times the legal limit for driving and indicates severe alcohol poisoning. If Haupt was struggling with this level of alcohol abuse in 2009, it's reasonable to question his competency during David's 2000 trial, when witnesses reported smelling alcohol on him. The fact that Haupt lost his driver's license for DUI just 1 month after David's sentencing further supports the conclusion that David received ineffective assistance of counsel, one of the most fundamental violations of a defendant's constitutional rights. This brings us to the central question that haunts this case. How can we know if someone is wrongfully convicted? The David Thorne case illustrates the terrifying ease with which a potentially innocent person can be swept up in a flawed investigation and railroaded through a broken system. Consider the evidence of David's innocence. He had a solid alibi for the time of the murder. He had no history of violence. He was paying child support and maintaining a good relationship with Yvonne. The forensic evidence contradicts the prosecution's theory of the crime. The star witness recanted his testimony. Alternative suspects with stronger motives were never investigated thoroughly. Critical exculpatory evidence was withheld from the defense. His attorney was likely impaired and drunk during the trial, yet David remains in prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The distinction between guilty and not guilty becomes crucial here. A not guilty verdict doesn't necessarily mean the jury believes the defendant is innocent. It means they weren't convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant committed the crime. So if you're on a jury and you vote not guilty, you're not saying you believe the person to be innocent, but rather that you are not convinced they're guilty. It's a subtle yet important distinction. But what happens when the system fails so completely that an innocent person is convicted despite overwhelming evidence that raises considerable doubt? The David Thorne case demonstrates that wrongful convictions aren't just statistical anomalies. They're the inevitable result of a system that prioritizes convictions over truth, that allows tunnel vision to replace thorough investigation, and that permits coerced confessions to substitute for real evidence. David Thorne has now been in prison for over 24 years for a crime we can't be sure he committed. He has missed his son Brandon's entire childhood, from age 2 to adulthood. He was in his mid-20s when he was incarcerated and is now approaching 50 years old. His case has been taken up by Proclaim Justice, an organization founded by Jason Baldwin of the West Memphis 3, who understands firsthand what it's like to be wrongfully convicted. Journalist Maggie Freeling has also championed David's case through her podcast, Murder in Alliance, bringing national attention to the injustice. Maggie and Jason did an unbelievable job at investigating this case, and their in-depth investigation was all chronicled on Maggie's podcast, which is linked below. Despite all the evidence of his innocence, David's appeals have been consistently rejected. The same judge who presided over his original trial also presided over his post-conviction hearing, creating an obvious conflict of interest. How can a judge objectively review claims that his own trial was fundamentally flawed? All appeals, local, state, and federal, have been rejected, leaving David with few legal options. His case represents a perfect storm of prosecutorial misconduct, police tunnel vision, ineffective assistance of counsel, and judicial indifference to obvious injustice. While David Thorne sits in prison for a crime he may or may not have committed, the real killer of Yvonne Lane may still walk freely among us. This isn't just a tragedy for David, it's a public safety issue. Whoever brutally murdered Yvonne may never have been held accountable, and they may have committed other crimes in the intervening decades. The Alliance Police Department's tunnel vision didn't just destroy David's life, it allowed all other possibilities to simply disappear. By focusing exclusively on David from the moment they left the crime scene, they ignored leads that could have led to other suspects or stronger evidence, which was severely lacking in this case. The eyewitness who identified a police officer leaving Yvonne's house with a trash bag was never properly investigated. The officer who allegedly tried to force himself on Yvonne was never seriously considered as a suspect. Other men in Yvonne's life who had stronger motives than David were dismissed without thorough investigation. This represents a complete failure of the justice system's primary function: to identify and prosecute the guilty while protecting the innocent. The David Thorne case isn't just about one man's fight for a fair shake. It's about the systemic failures that make such injustices possible. It illustrates how coerced confessions, prosecutorial misconduct, ineffective assistance of counsel, and judicial indifference can combine to destroy innocent lives. The case also highlights the vulnerability of people with intellectual disabilities and mental health issues in the criminal justice system. Joe Wilkes was exactly the kind of person who should have been protected from coercive interrogation tactics, not exploited by them. His emotional and behavioral challenges made him an easy target for manipulation, and the system failed to protect him. The fact that Joe later recanted his confession and has maintained that recantation for over 2 decades warrants some serious inquiry. As we reach the end of this investigation, we're left with the same question we started with. How can we know if someone is wrongfully convicted? The David Thorne case provides a chilling answer. Sometimes we can't, because the very system designed to find truth becomes the instrument of injustice. And sometimes the evidence just isn't definitive enough to come to a satisfactory conclusion. David Thorne has been in prison for over 2 decades for a crime there is scarce evidence he committed. Joe Wilkes, who was coerced into confessing to a murder he didn't commit, also remains incarcerated, a victim of the same broken system. Meanwhile, the real killer of Yvonne Lane could still be out there. The Alliance Police Department's tunnel vision and investigative failures didn't just result in wrongful convictions. They allowed a murderer to escape accountability. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our justice system. It shows us that innocence is not always enough to prevent conviction, that the presumption of innocence can be overwhelmed by prosecutorial zeal and police misconduct, and that the difference between freedom and a life sentence can come down to factors completely beyond a defendant's control. The David Thorne case is a stark reminder that wrongful convictions aren't just statistics. They're human tragedies that destroy lives, tear apart families, and undermine the very foundations of justice. Until we acknowledge these systemic failures and work to address them, cases like David's will continue to occur. I want to add that I am not saying David is innocent, nor am I saying he is guilty. I'm simply saying I have not seen enough evidence to conclude one way or another, and we have a verdict for that. It's called not guilty because there is reasonable doubt. As you consider everything you've heard today, ask yourself, if this could happen to David Thorne, a man with no criminal history, a solid alibi, and evidence of his innocence, could it happen to you? Could it happen to someone you love? The answer, unfortunately, is yes, and that should terrify all of us. What do you think? After hearing all the evidence, do you believe David Thorne is guilty or innocent? Do you think Joe Wilkes was coerced into confessing to a crime he didn't commit? And most importantly, how can we prevent wrongful convictions like this from happening in the future? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I want to hear what you think about this case and whether justice has truly been served.